interrupting your stay in the sukkah, because instead of being under the schach, under the ceiling of the schach, you're under the ceiling of the canopy of your bed. I don't know if I've told you, when I was, sometimes you go to museums or castles, you see the type of beds that they had. A lot of times they have this like canopy on top of the bed. It's like, maybe it's to protect from insects or certain things, that there's some sort of cover. And now the question is would that invalidate, would you have to remove that cover during the time of Sukkot? Because the Torah says you have to sit in a sukkah. And now the question is this canopy that you're sitting in, is this interrupting the sukkah? Instead of being under the schach, you're under this canopy. That's the issue that the Gemara was discussing, and the Gemara was talking about. There's a whole discussion. Does the canopy have in order to be a canopy? Many times you say you have to have a tefach, has to be a size of the tefach between 3 and 4 inches. It has to be flat. If it comes to an angle, if it doesn't come to, if there's no flatness of a roof, that's not called a tent. That would not interrupt. That's what we said in the Gemara. That's how we opened up the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel, and Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel says even a bigger chidush. He says that a kila bed, since it's such a temporary type of bed, even if it has a roof, even if it comes to a flat roof, he says, as long as it's not 10 tefachim high, as long as it doesn't have a certain height, no certain space that this canopy is covering, it's not considered an interruption. So that was Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, that he allowed you to sit in this kila, or sleep in the kila, even though it had a roof, as long as it wasn't 10 tefachim high. That was the version on Yud Amud Beis. And on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, it went even further, that he says, Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, he said, even if something is 10 tefachim high, as long as it doesn't have a roof. So you have two different morning, Mr. Bitesh. Look what's here. So we had two opinions. We have two statements, but they're not contradictory. One statement is, as long as you're not 10 tefachim high, you don't have a certain height, so that's not, even though you have a covering, even if it's coming across, you're not 10 tefachim high, you are not considered a real interruption. And the other law is that even if you're 10 tefachim high, as long as you don't have a flat tent on top. So in order to be a problem, according to these two versions of Shmuel, good morning, Boker Tov, good to see you. In order to be a problem, you have to meet both criteria. It has to have a flat roof, and it also has to be 10 tefachim high. If it doesn't have both, it would not be a problem. And we said that specifically because a kila is not a real strong structure. Well, we said if it's a strong structure, you might not need to have the 10 tefachim high, even if it's less than 10 tefachim will be a problem. So we have in the Gemara, we are on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. If you want to send to the group Adam that we're on, 11a. Everyone has to remember to say Birkat HaTorah before learning. If anyone didn't say Birkat HaTorah, they have to say Birkat HaTorah. So we are on the Gemara on 11a. Dorash Rabba Barav Huna. We have Dorash Rabba Huna. This is in the article, it's 11a1 on the right column, middle of the page. Dorash Rabba Huna. Muta lishan b'kila, afal pi sheyesh lagag, afal pi shegvu asara. So here's a new chidush. Good morning. How are you? Good to see you. There's a minyan upstairs, and it's a minyan upstairs if you want. We also, anytime we have time, we have the class here until 7:25. Minyan upstairs, yes. Now, the Gemara says, comes down by Rav Huna, he says, Muta lishan b'kila, if we have it, Torah Shal Rav Huna, on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, 11a, Muta lishan b'kila, afa pi sheyesh lagag, afa pi shegvu asara. He says, you're allowed to go ahead and it has both the height of 10 tefachim, and it has Even though it has a height of 10 tvachim. So, which is usually the height for these type of things to be considered a 10. You think it's covering an area with a space underneath of 10 tvachim, space of 30 to 40 inches of hollow space with this sheet running across, and it's flat. It's a flat roof. It's not coming to a corner. It's actually a flat roof. Nevertheless, this opinion says it's still not an interruption. You could sleep in such a thing in the sukkah. So the Gemara says, who is that opinion like? The Gemara says, Kiman ke Rabbi Yehuda. It's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Amma, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Lo ati ohel umavatel ohel kva. The Gemara says that it's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says a temporary tent does not have the ability to knock out a more permanent type of tent. What does that mean? The sukkah is a structure that you make and it stands still and it stands steady, and it's more for all purposes, for our purposes, it's considered more of a permanent structure for this time, during this time of Pesach, of Sukkot. However, the kila bed moves. The kila bed is a temporary type of structure, just like a sheet. What do you have across on top of you? A sheet. So this is a very temporary type of structure. So a temporary structure does not remove you from a permanent structure. We don't look at you like you're not in the sukkah because you're in this makeshift or this type of bed. You have a type of cover over you. This cover, this sheet that runs across the bed, right? You understand the case, right? You're laying in a bed, and then you have this canopy over you. Being that the canopy is temporary, right? It's something that's not something of permanent. That does not have the ability to remove you from being in to consider you as if you're there and you're not in the sukkah, as if you're not under the schach of the sukkah. We don't look at you that way. That is this opinion. The Gemara says that none. We learned in good morning, Jaime.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Jaime, Mr. Haber is back at the share in person.
Oh, that is a blessing above all.
Mr. Haber says he says good morning to you.
Good morning, and I love him.
Here's what he said. He loves you, Mr. Haber. He loves you too. So the Gemara says we are on 11A1. We just brought a new opinion that we never had before. We have an opinion that if someone is in this sleeping, and we're almost finished with this, we're getting to a new Mishnah coming up soon. If someone is sleeping in this bed in a sukkah, and it has a canopy, right? But it's not this bed is not, it's not a permanent type, not a strong structure, this type of bed, and the canopy is not so affixed strongly. Even if the canopy has a flat roof, even if the canopy is 10 tefachim high, this opinion says we consider you're still sleeping in a sukkah. And it does not invalidate you and say you're not sitting in a sukkah because you're sleeping, and so there's something interrupting your sleeping. There's this canopy that's interrupting between you and the schach. It's not, this opinion says that's not a problem in this circumstance. And the Gemara says, Keman ke Rabbi Yehuda. This opinion holds like Rabbi Yehuda, 11A1 on the right column. And what do we find Rabbi Yehuda? The Oma lo ati ahel arai muvatel oel keva. A temporary tent will not knock out a more permanent type of cover, more permanent type of tent, meaning this temporary kilah bed will not knock out the schach that's on top. Where do we find that? An interesting story, Titnan. We have a Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? Omar Rabbi Yehuda. There's a Mishnah later on. There's a whole discussion in the Mishnah. It's the beginning of the Mishnah, the beginning of the second parak of Masechah Sukkah. Can you sleep under a bed in a sukkah? You're going under the bed. You recommend people should sleep on a bed, right, Mr. Bitesh? And men, by the way, are supposed to sleep on their side, not on their back and not on their stomach, by the way. That's the halacha, by the way. Men are supposed to sleep on their side. Jaime, you heard that halacha I just mentioned. I mentioned that men are supposed to sleep on their side, not on their back and not on their stomach. That's a halacha issue. I mean, there's a whole discussion you start on the left, go to the right, but I say the best thing is any side. Main thing is any side. A man should not sleep on their stomach or on their back. That's really a halacha, because there's a concern he might have a accident in the middle of the night. That's the issue, why a man shouldn't sleep on his stomach or on his back. I don't know why people don't know about it enough. I don't know why it's not taught more. I'm just telling you that's from a halachic perspective. Men are not supposed to sleep on their back or their stomach. So the Gemara says that none. We learned in the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Nohegim hayinu lishan tachas hamita b'fnei hasakinim. Rabbi Yehuda says we used to sleep under the bed in the sukkah. We slept under the bed in the sukkah, and we slept. And who was there in the sukkah? There were great rabbis in the sukkah. And the rabbis didn't say anything to us. Why did the rabbi say it? So he's under the impression, Rabbi Yehuda said, because since the bed moved from place to place, it's a temporary type of tent. So yes, we were sleeping under the bed. So so what was covering us? The bed was covering us, but that's called a temporary tent. And that temporary tent does not have the power to knock out the most permanent tent, which is the sukkah that we were in the sukkah. We were under the bed in the sukkah. We slept under the bed. So now the Chachamim later on, I think we're going to see the Chachamim disagree. They say that's not allowed. But that's right, you can't sleep under the bed in the sukkah. But this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says that you could sleep under the bed in the sukkah. And the Gemara's understanding, even if the height of the bed was a 10 tefachim bed, it was a 30 or 40-inch bed that was coming off the ground, there was a space between the bottom of the bed and the floor of a space of 10 tefachim, and nevertheless we stayed there, and the Chachamim did not say anything. It could be that the other opinions hold that that's the space of the bed was not 10 tefachim, but Rabbi Yehuda is saying that we see that if you have a bed that's 10 tefachim high, a tent of 10 tefachim, even though it's flat, it's still not a problem to sleep in such a thing. So the Gemara says, "V'lema halacha Rabbi Yehuda." Why doesn't Rabbi Bar Avuna? Rabbi Avuna says you could sleep in this kila bed in the sukkah with the canopy. So why, even though it has a flat roof and even though it's 10 tefachim high? So why doesn't he say outright? If the source, Mr. Hebrew always likes to say, law, source, reason. If the source for the halakha, if the source is that he follows Rabbi Yehuda, so why doesn't he just say the law follows Rabbi Yehuda? Good morning, Mark. So that's the Gemara's question. If you're saying a halacha, and your whole basis for your halacha is based on this rabbi's opinion of the Mishnah, so wouldn't it be more sensible to just say, I hold like that rabbi? Meaning, it is a dispute in the Mishnah. Can you sleep under the bed in the sukkah? That's a dispute in the Gemara later on. Rabbi Yehuda says you can. The Chacham say you can't. Comes Rabbi Bar Avuna, and he's saying a certain law about the kila bed, which is totally learned and totally sourced based on that Mishnah later on. So the Gemara's question is, why doesn't he just say, I hold like the opinion of the Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah later on? Why should he say a case? He talks about a case of a kila bed, and now we're going to figure out, and we're going to say, what is the reason for that halacha? Because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda later on. Just go straight. Cut straight to the skip. Just tell me openly, I hold like Rabbi Yehuda. And once you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, so we'll know that we'll know this case as well. That's the Gemara's question. Is it clear, the Gemara's question? If you're saying a halacha, you create a case, and you're telling me the reason for this halacha is because you hold of that rabbi, so just say you hold like that rabbi, and then we'll figure out this case That's the Gemara's question. And the Gemara is obviously going to answer, I will tell you, hold like that, Rabbi, you would not know this case. Why? Let's see what the Gemara is going to say. So the Gemara answers, I amar halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're turning the page. If he would say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, hava mina, I would have said that Rabbi Yehuda is only talking about mitah. I would say regarding a bed, because what's the story of a bed? A bed is made to sleep on, not to sleep under a bed. So since a bed is made to sleep on and not under a bed, so then you would say that if a person is sleeping under a bed, that's not called you're under a tent, because it's not a tent at all. It's not made for you to be under that bottom, be under a bed. If
Like
I would
sleeping under a table, no?
Say it again.
It's like a piece of furniture. You're sleeping under a table.
Exactly. It's not made to be. It's not made for a person to have a canopy. The bottom of a bed. Yeah, we like to store things under the bed. We store maybe our shoes under a bed, but it's not made for shelter purposes. Maybe today in Manhattan, every inch is special, so we use every inch. So now it's a storage area under a bed, but that's not what it's made. The bed is not made to protect. A table, like Jaime said, a table is not made. The bottom of the table is not made as a cover to protect as a tent. So therefore, you would have said, maybe the law, if I would just say the law follows Rabbi Yehuda, I would say specifically in the case of the bed, if you're sleeping under the bed, it's made to sleep on top of the bed, and it's not made for the space underneath the bed. And therefore, it's not considered a tent. But of a kila, but when you're sleeping in the kila bed, in the sukkah, where you're made to sleep in that bed and you have a canopy over it, and that canopy is made, what do you do? And the canopy is made, look who's Mr. Haber is back. And the canopy is made for the purpose of a tent, of a kila de la tocha asiyah, ema. I might have thought, lo, you would not be able to sleep inside the kila bed in the sukkah. So therefore, Kamash Malan comes Rabbi Barav Huna, and he tells us, Kamash Malan, time of the Rabbi Yehuda, the reason of Rabbi Yehuda is the lo ati o el harai umavatel o el keva. A temporary tent does not have the ability to knock out something that's more permanent. And the kila bed that's on the move, that's made temporarily, the type of sheet that runs across, does not knock out the overall more permanent structure of the sukkah, of the schach that you're in. So if you're sleeping, so this opinion holds, you're sleeping in the kila bed, and you have the canopy of the kila above you. Since it's a temporary type of tent, it does not disqualify the overall more permanent structure of the sukkah that you are in, and therefore he holds you could sleep in that bed in the sukkah. Morning, Simon. So therefore, yes.
Rabbi, I asked a question on Thursday, and I wasn't there Friday, so. But my question still, I wonder about it, which was, so if the covering over the four-post bed is more than not more than four tefachs high, right? Over that, it makes it the under area pasul, right? Is that where we land?
If it's 10 tefachim high. If it comes to a flatness and it's 10 tefachim
flat,
and it's right, if it's 10 tefachim high, we say that would invalid. There's a machloket in the Gemara about this. That's the machloket in the Gemara. Would that sheet that runs across, would it invalidate you? Is it considered that you're sleeping in some sort of other
Sukkah.
area, right?
So now, my question was, if you're 2 tefachs under the sukkah, any decoration or a sheet under the sukkah also makes that area pasul, right?
Right. We said if you have decorations that are hanging lower than 4 tefachim, lower than, let's say, lower than a foot,
right?
It's not close to the ceiling, right? We said the decorations have to be close to the schach. They're supposed to be within the within
So
4 tefachim.
Why do I need this if it surely is below that what you call the decoration 4 tefachs? Why do I need this? Why is this conversation not, kind of knocked out with the idea of it's already no good? Once I'm below 4 tefachs, then everything under that is no good.
So let's explain to address Mark's point. If you have decorations that are coming lower than 4 tefachim,
or a sheet,
so that means, let's say you have this sheet, a beautiful embroidered sheet with beautiful designs on the sheet, beautiful pictures on the sheet.
Whatever.
So if you have that sheet that's lower, if it's going across coming down across, if it's lower than 4 tefachim, so the fact that it's lower than 4 tefachim, and that serves as a tent, because the height, the space between that decoration, let's say the space between the bottom of the decoration and the floor is going to be, let's say, 10 tefachim. So you have created a private, a separate tent within the sukkah. So instead of staying under the schach, if the schach is close, if the decorations are close to the schach, we look at the decorations as if they're nullified by the schach. They're like part of the schach. But when the decorations are far away, meaning what's called far away? If it's more than a foot, let's say, if it's more than 4, let's say around 4 tefachim away. But now, Mark, we're talking about this decoration is also certain, it's coming across, and this is serving like a separate tent. So the decorations are called a separate tent. Now, you're correct. It could be, Mark, that opinion, this opinion of the Gemara that says it's good, our Gemara says you could be under a temporary type of tent. Maybe he would hold the decorations would not be a problem. But we who hold that you can't sleep in a kila bed. If you have a kila bed that's both 10 tefachim high, and it's also a flat roof, we say it's no good. So that would fit with the sukkah decorations. But the second decorations are also flat. Okay, this opinion the Gemara today holds you could sleep under a bed even if it's more than 10 tefachim high and it's straight, it comes a flat. This opinion is a big chidush. There's no letter of the Rambam on this opinion. Doesn't seem like we hold like this opinion. This opinion would say it's good even if it's flat, the roof, morning Mr. Silverman, and even if it's 10 tefachim high. We hold, if you look back on the Gemara, we hold the only time the Gemara said that we hold that it's good is if it's not 10 tefachim high. And maybe the decorations are 10 tefachim high. Between the bottom of the decorations and the floor, you have a area, you have a sheet running across. If you run the sheet lower than 4 tefachim, it's like a separate tent, and it's a space between that and the floor of more than 10 tefachim, and we hold that's a problem. That answers your question. Okay, so therefore,
then they don't knock each other. Then it doesn't.
Your question would be if there wouldn't from the deck, in order for if the decoration to the bottom of the, from the bottom of the decorations to the floor, it's less than 10 tvachim, then your question would be, it shouldn't be considered a real tent. That would be your question. That will be a question that has to be looked into. That's still not answered. How do we address that? Okay, so that's what the Gemara says. Therefore, loshna mita, loshna kila. Therefore, it teaches us that Rabbi Yehuda there's no difference whether you're under a bed, you're on top of a bed, as long as this opinion holds, as long as you don't have a space between the kila, there's no space of 10 tvachim. This holds that as long as it's a temporary structure, even if it's 10 tvachim high, even though it has a flat roof, Rabbi Yehuda holds he's lenient. It says that he's still considered sleeping in a sukkah. Okay, now we're coming to a new Mishnah. We welcome back to Navid. The Mishnah is on 11a2. Hidla aleh et hagefen. What happened is you made a sukkah, but how did you make the sukkah? You put a vine on top of the sukkah, and what the problem was, there's a halacha that says it can't be attached to the ground. You can't use something that's attached to the ground as your schach. It has to be detached. Like you can't have a tree that's attached to the ground, serving with the branches of the tree, serving as your schach. Therefore, there's a whole issue that we learned about earlier. You have to make sure that when you put up your sukkah, there's no branches above you from a tree, because there's a lot of halachic issues that it has possibility to possibly invalidate your sukkah, because that is not kosher schach. The schach that is attached to the ground is not kosher schach. So therefore, what happened over here? The guy went ahead and he first put a vine on top of his sukkah, or similar put ivy on top of his sukkah, and after he put it on top of it, the Gemara says he cut it. Good morning, Yosef. He cut it.
Morning, Rabbi.
Morning. So now we're going to see about that. What's the halacha? Do you have to go ahead and now move every piece? Because when you put the schach on top of the sukkah, when it was placed there, it was not kosher, right? So now, by just cutting, now he just did a cut. Is that good enough? Or you have to raise every piece of vine, every piece of branch. Now, do you have to go ahead and pick it up and put it down? That's going to be the discussion in our Mishnah. So, hidla es hagefen v'sadalat ve'et ha-kisos. If he went ahead and he lifted onto a sukkah a grapevine that's attached to the ground, or a squash, a gourd tree, or the branches or ivy. And what happened was the Succah Gaba, he used it as schach. He used it as schach besula. It is the sukkah, or what happened, or the Succah Gaba, they translate is on top of these branches. He put some kosher schach on top. But the majority of the schach here was, the majority of the cover was made from these branches, these vine that was attached to the ground. So since
Not
the majority
kosher.
was made from not kosher schach, even though you threw in, you put a little kosher schach on, you put some kosher branches, detached branches, but at the end of the day, the majority is not kosher schach, because the schach was attached to the ground. So the Succah Gaba, even though you place schach on top of it, pesula, it is invalid. Yosef, you wanted to say something? V'im haya hasikuch harbe mehem. If you went ahead and you had more kosher schach than not kosher schach, and also you mixed it in a way that you can't discern what's kosher and what's not kosher, because the general rule is, for something to become nullified is only when you're not able to see clearly the thing. But if you see something if you're able to see the thing that's forbidden, you don't say it's nullified by the majority, you just have to remove it. So therefore you went ahead and it was mixed in a way. Or shekasasan, or you cut that schach that was attached to the ground. This is what the Gemara is going to focus on this case. Not
That would
going
be
to
good.
focus so much on, yes, Mr. Silverman.
That would be good if they cut it. And if it's hanging
Very
over.
good. Very good. The Gemara is going to, but we're going to see. Also, you have to move. You're going to have to move every one. We're going to see according to one opinion in the Gemara.
Okay.
But here we're going to see. Rashi's going to say you have to move every one because Rashi's going to say that that it's the schach is not kosher unless you move it. We'll see. So Kitzasan, or you went ahead and you cut it, then it's kashera. If you cut the vine, now the vine, you place the vine on the sukkah, it was
What
not
if
kosher.
the vine was in a pot?
Say it again.
What if the vine was in a pot?
So a pot is not kosher schach. Again, you want to know if that's called attached to the ground. If the vine was in a pot, so I would say a pot. The question is, does the pot have holes in it? That the pot it has holes? Is it getting from the ground? Where is he? Yosef. That's the question also.
You getting the water? Where you get the water?
Yeah, in other words,
I'm
if there's
saying
a hole
where-
in the pot. If
if
there's
you
a
have
hole,
Oh,
a hole-
the pot, you can move it. You know, you can move
but
it.
in the
You put it
bottom,
in
the
chair.
bottom, is it
Right,
pulling
right.
water? Is it kissing the ground with the
Right,
dirt to the dirt?
Is the pot kissing the
No.
ground? Is the pot getting no? So that might be
Not connected.
that's a good question. That would be a
Not-
good question. We have to look up. Is it considered when you have a lot of gemaras about these things when something's if you have something, let's say in a pot, if there's something, if there's holes on the bottom, then it's drawing from the ground still, most probably. It's considered attached to the ground, like the ground. But if you have a pot, if you have a vine in a pot, so his question is that called detached? Meaning, could you use that? Let's say technically. then you
In
go
the
ahead and you-
Gemara, it talks about it when it doesn't have a hole, it's not attached to the ground.
Okay, we have to see more. The question is, would we make any gezerah? Would we make gezerah because when it has a hole, when it doesn't have a hole, because of the case when it will have a hole, it would sound like you might be correct. Maybe on a Torah level, it might be considered detached. The question would be on a rabbinic level. We have to see more. But that's another good question. So here the Gemara says, you went ahead and the Mishnah says Ze'akla. Here is the rule. Now the Gemara says this is the rule. So again, what did we just say in the Mishnah? If you place the vine on the sukkah while it was attached to the ground, it's no good. If you went ahead, that's no good. It's not kosher schach. It's attached to the ground. Once you cut the vine, even though when you placed it, it wasn't a good placing. The Mishnah says it's kosher, but we're going to see more details. The Gemara is going to say you have to lift it up. What? No. So this case is it could be the whole vine. You took the vine, was attached to the ground. You covered your schach with it without any kosher schach, but then you cut the vine, so it's no longer attached to the ground. So the Mishnah states that's good enough, but the Gemara is going to state, but you have to move every piece. That's what the Gemara is going to say according to one opinion.
But you're not allowed to cut it, by the way.
You could use a vine as schach, as long as you cut it beforehand and you place it on the top of the sukkah. But don't put the vine on the sukkah while it's attached to the ground still. Because then you have to cut it and then move every piece. That's what.
But I'm saying you're not really allowed to cut it because it's mashrit.
What about cutting it? What did you say, Yosef?
When you cut a vine just for the sake of like something else, it's
Oh,
you
you're saying about tashrit. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about the vine, the part of the vine that's, let's say, that's not it's not growing anymore. You don't use it anymore. It's dried out. Let's say it's talking about that. Because Yosef is asking me, maybe there's a problem of about tashrit. If it's able to produce fruit, you might be violating the sin of wasting something that has much more potential, much more use. That you can produce fruit instead of using it just for a cover of a sukkah. Right? So that's what. So the Gemara says, Dehaklan. Now the Mishnah states a very important rule. This is the basic 101, whatever the expression is, in the laws of Chach. Dehaklan. Kol shehu mekabel tuma. Anything that's mekabel tuma, anything that has the ability to accept tuma is not kosher for Chach. Therefore, these things, let's say bamboo sticks or waste products from the granary or waste products from the winery, the branches, these vines, these are things that have no, that are not susceptible to receive tumah. To be able to become tameh, you have to be something that has purpose, has more purpose, or something that has use. A food could receive tumah, a utensil could receive tumah, but the waste products, the branches, are not things that have the ability to receive tumah. Even if a dead animal goes on that item, or it goes, it will not make, or a dead. What do you say? But it's not. It's still not. It's if you make a utensil out of it, you make a nice utensil. It could catch things. It could hold things. But in general, we say they're not susceptible to tumah. So, in order for it to be kosher for schach, it cannot be susceptible to tumah. And number one, and number two is it has to grow from the ground. If it doesn't grow from the ground, it's not kosher schach. Even if it's not able to become tameh, even an item that can't become tameh, if it doesn't grow from the ground, it's not acceptable for schach. Kol davar shehu mekabel tumah. If it's mekabel tumah, the ein gedulo min haaretz, or it doesn't grow from the ground, ein misachem bo. You cannot use for schach. The kol davar she'eina mekabel tumah, but it's something that's not mekabel tumah. V'gidulo min haaretz, and it grows from the ground. Misachim bo. Those are the items that you could use for what? For schach. Just if you want an easy way to remember, you're in a sukkah, you're in a holy place. Something that's not, it's a place that you're not mekabel tumah. When you protect yourself in a shelter of a sukkah, that's where you're holy, you're not going to receive tumah. Symbolic of that is maybe, perhaps that's the idea. You have to have something that's not mekabel tumah. You have to remember that's what life's about. Life's about not to be mekabel tumah. A lot of people are mekabel a lot of tumah from society, and you have to shelter yourself. You have to place yourself in a place in life that you're not mekabel tumah. And that's the schach that's used to make a sukkah. Has to be something that you're covering. Your shelter has to be a shelter that's not mekabel tumah.
That's beautiful,
Okay.
Rabbi.
Yes, thank you. That's an original idea.
Beautiful,
Yosef Rabbi
beautiful.
Yosef. Thank you. So you should think about that when you're sitting in a sukkah. You should think about the schach, right, Dr. David? The schach is not mekabel tumah. We should not be mekabel tumah.
Rabbi, we should think about it all year.
What do you say?
We should think about it all year.
Right, and we are also gidulo min haaretz. Where do we come from? We come from Hashem from afar. Hashem made a person from the ground, and you have to remember we are gidulo. We came from the ground. So maybe that's the idea. We grow from the ground. Therefore, the schach has to be something that comes from the ground, but our job is not to be kabel tumah, not to receive. Yes. There's a lot of things, right. The halacha, I think there's technical halacha and there's other. The technical halacha says you cannot have a wild dog. You can't own and raise a wild dog in your house. A dog that's more of a dangerous type of dog, these type of dogs. Like you have the Gemara that says that there was a pregnant woman and she was walking and there was a dog near her, and the owner of the dog says, "Don't worry, I removed its teeth. It can't bite." So she said, "It's already too late. I already miscarried already." She already miscarried. She felt the baby move out of fear. So there's that type of dog we find in halacha you can't have. Now, whether other types of other types of pets, is appropriate to have or not, I don't know what they say. Al pi Kabbalah, I'm not familiar with Kabbalah to tell you if what they say about these about having these pets or other things.
Rabbi, just to show you the wisdom of the Torah and Gemara, there's not a week that goes by where a wild dog doesn't kill its owner. Not a week.
Wow. Doesn't kill its
Every
owner. That a
week.
wild dog doesn't kill its owner. And the halacha, right? Exactly. The halacha says you're not allowed to. Asul lo adam. You're not allowed to megadel a kelev ra. You can't have a wild dog. You're not allowed to have such a thing.
That's
Wow.
why the goyim like it.
You know,
Yeah.
funny story. My neighbor over here, many years ago, she saw like a German Shepherd outside, and was standing outside, and she gave him a food, and slowly become friendly, and she brought him home. One day, she took him to the vet, and it was actually coyote,
Oh wow.
half coyote, half wolf, actually.
So we're
he
going
was
to end with the
in their house,
very
and everything was good.
Just going to end with the following halacha.
And he was Jewish.
Yosef Rabbi Yosef, Hamed Rav Huna, the Yosef Kamama, and he says, "Osha katasan kasherat." That's that where you said if you put the vine on the sukkah while it was attached to the ground, and then you cut it, it's kosher. Amarav sarich lenanea. You have to shake, you have to move, and Rashi says you have to move each and every piece of vine that's on the schach, because every piece of vine that was placed on the schach, since it was placed there, it wasn't kosher at that moment. The fact that you just made a snip across the vine, now it's detached, but it has to be when you place the schach, your placement of the schach makes it a kosher sukkah. It
Does
can't
that-
be that you just went ahead and when the schach was placed, it wasn't kosher. And now that you did something on the side, now you want to make it becomes kosher automatically. That doesn't work.
Is that a question of lishma? A question of you did it lishma or not lishma? Is that
It's
something?
not a question of lishma, because technically schach doesn't have to be put on lishma. You can have a
Okay,
goy.
good.
Technically,
Okay,
even if a guy would put on the schach, if it's put for a purpose of shade, it's called schach. But here the issue is when the schach comes on, it has to be placed on that when you place the schach, now it's kosher. But if your placement of the schach, it's not kosher because it was attached to the ground. That's not good enough by doing something on the side. You have to do an action to make it kosher. An action of placing the schach.
We do l'shem yachud.
Technically, I mean, I'm not going to recommend it. Technically, we found in the Gemara earlier that if a guy would put on schach, as long as
Okay.
it's placed for the purpose of shade, the Gemara said that would be kosher. Maybe
Rabbi.
we move it also, even if a guy puts it on. But technically, the Gemara said earlier that if a guy would put on the schach, technically technically the Gemara says it's kosher. Yeah.
Rabbi, the schach, we're not allowed to touch it during the holiday, right?
Mukseh.
You're not allowed to use it for personal use during the holiday. You can't take the schach and say, I want to use it for firewood. Because
No,
once
I'm
it's
saying-
designated
I'm
for a
saying the
mitzvah,
schach-
you can't ruin it from the mitzvah.
On the chag, you cannot touch it and fix it. Is the question?
Yeah,
on
on-
Chol
on-
Hamoed,
on-
on Chol Hamoed, you
on
can.
the Yom Tov, on the Yom Tov.
On Yom Tov, correct. On
In the
Chol
Chol
Hamoed, you
Hamoed,
can.
can you?
We welcome Mr. Haber back.
You can. On Chol Hamoed, you can move it.
Okay, you
On
can
the
fix
you
it.
can move it, but
somewhere.
not to take it off, not to
you can
take
fix
No,
away
no,
from the
just to
mitzvah.
fix it. If it's like
Fix it.
Yes,
hold it from
to
the
fix
wind
it
or
from the
something.
wood. Yes. Have a great day, Yosef.
Great
Thank
day,
you, Mr. Silverman. Have a great day,
Thank you,
everybody.
Rabbi.
thank you guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Amazing.
Thank you. Bye-bye.